Hello everyone, welcome to the string formatting for printing. And to be honest, you would really want to inject a variable into your string for printing. For example, you can have this variable name, my name equals to Daveworld, and you want to print something like hello Daveworld, right? How do we do that? For this example, we are doing hello, then we are concatenating the name Daveworld to it, right? Remember I told you what concatenation means, this plus icon, right? And basically, there are multiple ways to format strings for printing variables in them. And this method is always or sometimes known as string interpolation. So what this means is how can you basically interpolate strings together? How can you concatenate strings together? How can you make sure your strings and your variable names are printing out what exactly you want them to print out, right? So we're going to look at how we can do this, and there are various methods in printing out variables name and strings in there. We're going to explore three major ones. The first one we've spoken more about is concatenation, but the two we're going to explore in this lecture is the format method and the f string method, which means the formatted string literals, right? So in case you've forgotten about concatenation, don't worry, I'm going to briefly explain that before we jump into these important two ones that we're going to be talking about, right? And after we've explored these two different methods, you can pick whichever one works for you, right? So without being said, let's jump right into our notebook and look at how we can print strings and format them also. All right, guys, so I'm in my notebook now, and basically, as I said earlier, string formatting lets you inject items into a string rather than trying to change them together using comma or using string concatenations, right? So an example of string concatenations would be like, let's say you have a player name, let's just name a variable name, and I'll say player is equals to obviously Daveworld, and yeah, I'm going to say point, let's just say point is equals to, let's say you have 33 points, and let's say we want to print out using concatenation right now. So using where's ing, right? Using concatenation, right? So how can we do that? We can just say last night, right? NIGHT. Sometimes spelling can be quite funny, right? So I'll say last night, and I'll say concatenate player, right, which is the Dave world. Then I'll say plus, I'll say I'll put another string right here. Then I'll put space SCORED. This will make sense to you right now. Just hold on. I'll say scored, and right here I'll say plus, and I have to use str right here just to convert this 33 to a string, because you can't concatenate a string and an integer together, right? So I'm going to turn this to a string, 33 to a string, by using this str there, and I'll just put points, right? And I'll just say plus, and I'll just say points, right? And now, if I go ahead to run this cell, you can see that here we're going to have last night Dave World scored 33 points. All right, so let's try to format this very well. So last night, I'll put space right here, and after scored, I'll put space right here also. Now we should have last night Dave World scored 33 points, right? So basically, what we're trying to do here is we are just trying to add these variables name together, concatenate them together, right? So concatenation is just like you joining two strings together, right? So if you have a string of two and another string of two, and you try to concatenate together, you're going to have 22, not 4. If we have something like 2 plus 2 right here, we're going to have what? 22, because we are concatenating together. We are not adding it together. That's one thing you should take note of, right? If we don't have string right here and we run this here, we're going to have what? 4, right? So that's that about that, all right? So now that we've looked at a basic example of concatenation, let's talk more about dot format method, right? And if you want more detailed explanation of how this works, make sure to also check out the notebook on GitHub, and I have everything well explained right there, all right? So now let's take a look at some basic usage of dot format method. So let's do formatting. Let me just write the comment here. Formatting with dot format method, right? And don't forget, this is just a comment, right? So for example, we can have something like this. If we want to use the dot format method, we can have something like this: print right, into parentheses, and I'm going to say this is a string with an, and here I'll just put an empty curly brace, right? And after that, what I'm going to do is outside the quotes, I'm going to say dot format. And what this does is I'm going to pass in what value I want to pass into this particular um empty curly brace that I pass in right here, right? So right here, I'm just going to say pass in the word, let's just say insert, right? So if I run this cell, you can see we're going to have what? This string, this is a string with an insert. So what this does is Python goes ahead to read in these empty curly braces, and it puts in whatever value you pass into this dot format into this place. So that's how you can actually use the dot format method. So another way you can also do that is by using the objects and assigning keywords to them. All right. So for example, I can have something like this. I can say print into parentheses, and right here, I'll just say first object, and here I'll put in a curly brace and I'll say A, right? And right here I'll say second object, and I'm going to pass in B right here, right? And comma, I'll just say third object, and here I'll just pass in curly braces C also. And what we can do right now is we can now use dot format, right? And inside this parentheses, I can just pass in the variable names, right? I can just say A is equals to 1, I can say B is equals to, I can put a string right here, I can just say 2, and lastly, I'll just say C is equals to, I can put a floating point number right here, right? So I can say 12.3, right? It does not matter about the space. So if I run this, you can see that now we have first object is 1, second object is 2, and third object is 12.3, all right? And this is basically how you can use the dot format method. If you want a detailed notebook, you can go ahead to check out the GitHub notebook. I explained everything right there very well for you, all right? I also included Python links to the official Python documentation, so do well to check out the GitHub notebook that is linked in the description box below, all right? So the last one I'm going to be exploring for you guys is formatted string literals, right? And basically we're going to be using what f string, right? Remember that this is a comment, and a comment just tells you what that particular line of code does very well. So right here, I'm going to create a new variable, right? I'm going to say name, right, is equals to, right, Daveworld. And here, I'm going to say print into parentheses. I'm going to say f, right? Notice I'm starting with the f. And basically what this does is it just tells Python that you are trying to use an f string format. So I can say he said his name is, and I'll put a curly brace right here, and I'll just put the variable name right here. I'll just say name. So now if I go ahead to run this cell, you can see that right now we have what he said his name is Daveworld. So f string is actually pretty much simple and straightforward. So what happens is you make sure you start it by writing f, then inside the string, when you want to use any variable name, you just use a curly brace, then the name of the variable, right? And everything gets printed out, pretty much is right. So for example, let's say we have some extra variables. Let's say we have our age is equals to 30. Let's say our CGPA equals to 5.0, right? If I run this cell and I just say age right here, you can see it's showing 30. And if I say CGPA, if I run it, you can see it's showing 5.0, right? So if we say we want to use f-string method to print out this, how are we going to do this, right? So I can just say print, right, into parentheses, and I will say f-string. Don't forget, that's the first thing you have to start with first. So it tells Python you're trying to use an f-string literal method. So right here, I will just say to parentheses name is, and I'll just put age, right? And I'll just say yes, right? So what I'm trying to print, I'm trying to say Daveworld is 30 years old and he has a CGPA of blah 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 in his maybe 100 semester, right? So I'm saying Daveworld is age. So Daveworld name is gonna come here. Age, variable age is gonna come here. So Daveworld is 30 years, and right here I can say and he has a CGPA of, I'm just going to add in the variable name right here, which is what CGPA, right? CGPA in his 100 level first semester. So if I run this, you can see it's showing Dave Ward is 30 years and he has a CGPA of 5.0 in his 100 level first semester. So this is going to be what? Using F strings, right? And don't forget, check the note out. More detailed documentation is there, right? So let's use concatenation, right? So using concatenation is going to be like print, right? So I want you to pause the video and try to use concatenation and the dot format method without me telling you, without watching the video first, and see if you're going to get it, right? So pause the video right now and check if you can do this without me showing the solution, all right? All right. So if you got that right, or you came up with some little errors, no problem. You can watch how I'm going to do it together with you. All right. So right here, I'm going to say print name. Right. So don't forget name plus concatenation method. And here I'm going to say space is space, right? Then plus, don't forget we have to add in the age, but this age is an integer and we cannot concatenate an integer with a string. So we'd have to what? Convert it to a string, right? str. And right here, I'll just say age, and I'll just say plus, and I'll say, I don't need to add space here because there was no space in the 30 years right here. So I'll just say plus YEARS, and he has a CGPA of space, then I'll put space again plus str. Don't forget, this is a floating point number. We have to turn it to a string, and I'll say CGPA right here, then plus, and I'll say what? Space in his 100 level first semester, right? So if I run this, we should pretty much have the same thing that we have right here and right here. So let's try out the last method, which is what? Using dot format string method, right? So how can we do this, right? So pretty much like what I explained right here. What we're going to do is we're going to say print, right? Print into parentheses, and we're going to actually pass in those empty curly braces, right? Just like how we did in our first example, we're going to pass in those curly empty braces, right? So yeah, I'm going to put my quote, and I'm going to say empty brace one, right? And I'll say is, I'll put another empty brace, and here I can say yes, so I can not leave space in this yes, right? And I'll say and he has a is okay, and he has yes a CGPA of, and I'll put the curly brace right here again, and I'll say in his first semester, right? And yeah, I'll just say dot format, right? And I'll say what? Name, age, and I'll say what? CGPA, right? So if I run this here, we should pretty much have the same output right there. All right. So we have the same output right here, right here, and right here. Very good. All right. So I hope you guys understood what we did here. Okay, this should be HIS, so you can make the correction of this actually. I hope you guys understood what we did here, right? Using the format string method, using the concatenation method, and using the f string method, right? So pretty much it comes in handy when you want to use them, but the one I prefer using the most, or I use the most, is f string, and this is what you're going to also see me using in the lecture, right? Because this is actually pretty much simple and straightforward. We just use the f, passing the variable name, compared to this one, which you have to start concatenating, or compared to this one, which you have to start specifying the parentheses before you do the format, right? This is actually pretty simple and straightforward, especially for beginners. So this is what you're going to see me using in our lecture. And with that being said, this will be the end of the print formatting and string lecture. In our upcoming lecture, we are going to be talking more about list data type in Python. So next, we're going to be talking more about list in Python. See you in the next lecture. Bye bye.